welcome to the first episode of the Unqualified Wisdoms podcast, the introductory episode. I hope you enjoyed that little musical intro. I thought it might be a way to ease you into listening to my horrible voice for an extended period of time. I hope it worked out. Fingers crossed you're still listening to me. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I can't believe I'm actually sitting down and recording this right now. I've been planning out how I'm going to start off this podcast for the past 4 months, and I've just been putting it off for so long that I just decided to hell with it. I am going to start off today, right now, to kickstart this project. And I know that starting a podcast is by no means a unique idea. I know plenty of people that decided to start a podcast during the pandemic. I think it's one of those things where you're like, it's a creative outlet that you can utilize when you're not comfortable enough doing like a YouTube series or something like that, where you put your face out there, and like genuinely I relate to that so much. I feel like a lot of us in Gen Z have this desire to somehow become internet famous. And I'm not saying that, I don't have any similar aspirations. Look, man, I think anybody would enjoy, getting brands send you stuff and getting, paid for posting things on your Instagram or your Twitter feed. Like, don't get me wrong, sounds absolutely amazing, but at the same time, realistically, none of us are gonna achieve that. And that's fine. It's perfectly fine. I genuinely I could care less if this somehow makes me famous, which it won't. But, I just felt like I needed something to put my creativity towards. And I felt like a podcast wouldn't be a bad idea. So I decided, why don't I start my own little podcast and see where it gets me? But before I jump into anything of great value or knowledge, I want to do a little self-introduction. I know that most people listening to this podcast when it first comes out are people that know me personally, because I'm by no means famous enough to have random strangers listening to me. So I thought that maybe someday somebody that I don't know yet personally might listen to this. So I thought, why don't I make this episode where I introduce myself and you can get to know me as a person. So, starting off, my name is Luca. I'm 23, which makes me a Zoomer, or old by teenage standards and young by any other standard. By trade, I'm an unemployed scientist, as I jokingly tell my friends so I don't cry at night. My background's in medical and pharmaceutical science, which means I could be part of Big Bad Pharma, but they just won't hire me. And I don't say this for you to have any pity for me, I just say it so you know that I have a lot of free time on my hands, and that this is one of those escapes that I use so I don't feel empty inside. As you can most likely tell by the fact that I have an accent, I am neither British nor American. I'm originally from Brazil, which for a lot of people is a very foreign country, and they usually ask me if I speak Spanish. Now, for all of my listeners that don't know, Brazilians speak Portuguese. I know, we were a colony. That's just a little free history lesson for you. I know it's not commonly taught outside of South America, but hey, now you know more. Great stuff, right? But I moved away when I was 3 years old and ended up living in Germany, China, and England now. So, I had the opportunity to travel around quite a bit, get to know a lot of different places, which to some people might seem like a privilege. To other people that have the same experience as I, just seems like a way for you to lose your friends every couple of years. But I've made lifelong friendships. I love all the people I met throughout the way, and I'm so thankful for the actual experiences I had. But enough depressing knowledge about my life and what I do and what my whole shtick is. You might be asking yourself, what is this podcast? Why is it called Unqualified Wisdoms? And why are you, Luca, doing it? Which are all great questions, honestly, yeah. So, starting off, why a podcast? As I said, I feel like in a way, I've always wanted to do something creative that involved, putting myself out there and doing something that might not be within my comfort zone. Publishing something that can go out to the entire world just seems so grand in a sense. Where, like, I'm so accustomed, when you're discussing things with people and you're interacting with people in your personal life, you don't usually, broadcast everything out there to the world where there are millions of people that could listen to you. And that just somehow became so attractive to me in a sense, just really stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something that I might not have felt comfortable with a couple of months or years back. So I told myself I'm going to do this so that I can gain some new experiences. And I feel like podcasting has such a low barrier to entry in a sense, where honestly, everything you need is a basic recording software, which I believe most computers come with nowadays. I have GarageBand on my computer, and a somewhat decent sounding microphone. I've known people that record their podcasts on their phone, and it sounds perfectly fine. I'm lucky enough in a sense that I've been doing a lot of interviews recently, so I got myself, a decent recording mic, so that my quality is actually quite good compared to some people that start off super small. I just coincidentally had something lying around that was quite useful for this. And I think that by creating a podcast, you're creating content that can be enjoyed in so many different ways. It's not just restricted to, sitting down and watching something. A podcast can be enjoyed in so many different ways. You can be driving to work, you can be on the train, on a bus, you can be at home cleaning, or you can just be sitting down, relaxing, and listening to something. So I felt like a podcast was the right first step for me to start creating content that I would be proud of and I would enjoy myself in both creating and enjoying my work. Now, to answer the second question you might be asking yourself, why is it called unqualified wisdom? When I first started thinking about what I could personally podcast about, I thought about a lot of things that, would be within my ballpark, be it scientific, be it in the area of, my expertise academically. But I didn't want this podcast to be an extension of my professional skills. I wanted it to be an exploration of topics that I might not be an expert in. I wanted it to be a fun way for me to research things that I might not be super knowledgeable about. I love researching things. I have a great passion for finding new information, compiling that information, and telling people about it. And I find it always so much fun to actually gather knowledge, to gather new things, to gather all of those interesting facts and things like that. So I want to have some place where I can impart that interesting knowledge I acquire. I want to have a place where I can utilize all of this pent up desire to find out new things. I used to have to do a tremendous amount of research while I was still at university, and I've already graduated about 6 months, and I've just not had a way to, do the research I've been so accustomed to now. I feel like it's become somewhat paradoxical. I feel like most people that are not forced I feel like is the wrong word, but you have to do a lot of research when you're at university for a STEM subject like the one I did. And I feel like a lot of people develop this aversion to actually wanting to research topics, do all that legwork to find background information on a topic. But I've just begun to enjoy it so much that I feel empty inside when I'm not actively doing it. And I don't want to frame this as a research podcast where I'm just going to do a bunch of, literature research and just present a bunch of information to you. That's not the goal I have. I feel like I've lost out on a lot of conversations I usually have with my friends in day-to-day life. I've been at home for such a long period of time where I've not been interacting with people face to face that I just feel like I've lost out on a lot of good conversations. And what I usually would do, in day-to-day life, I watch a lot of content online. And when I see things that I find interesting, be it a funny TikTok, be it a YouTube video, be it anything there is to see, I want to tell people about these types of things. And I can just send people the videos and stuff like that, but you lose a lot of that, back to back. You lose that conversation you might have on a topic, but it can always spark a new conversation. And I feel like by creating this podcast, I have a way to have those conversations. They might be with just myself. I'm just talking to a computer screen at the moment, but I feel like I'm creating something. I'm having discourse. By gathering all of these things, I can just have a conversation, even if it's a conversation with nobody else but myself. Just having that opportunity to really voice my ideas and talk about things I find interesting and, just have fun with things I've seen and just enjoy myself while discovering new things. I just feel like that would be such a great thing for me to do. And that's where the idea and the name for the podcast came from. Unqualified Wisdoms. The name's supposed to be a joke that I might not be the first person you come to discuss these types of topics, but I might still have some level of knowledge or wisdom I can impart on you about these types of discussions. The knowledge itself might not always be, first-hand experience, but it is usually going to be things that I've gathered from seeing other people talk about the subject and have those important discussions. And I just want to highlight those points and guide people towards the direction where they have, experts or people that have that essential first-hand experience with the topics, getting those resources out there. But I also definitely plan on recording episodes on topics where I have extensive personal experience with the topic, and I've done a lot of research on said topic. That's going to include higher education, sexuality, gender identity, politics, and science. But I also want to be able to talk about topics that are important to me, but I might not have that personal experience in, such as racism and the radicalization of people by politicians. Those are topics that are so essential for us to discuss more because we're seeing it more and more in our everyday life. And these are the type of things that we have to combat. I want this to be a space where I can present ideas that might be able to kickstart some discussions that I believe should be happening much more frequently within your circles. The goal is that my words aren't taken as some form of gospel, but much more that they can serve as a springboard for people to look into these topics that they might never have thought about. And I would love this to be a two-way street, where I'm able to have these episodes and put them out and talk about these topics, but I would also love for people to make their own suggestions. I want to be able to, receive feedback, hear from everybody listening to this on what they think are things that should be discussed more often. And I want there to be ways for you to ask questions. I want to hear if people have more suggestions to be made, how things can be approached after, I present certain topics, if they have more insight into these ideas. And then I can revisit some of these discussions at later dates. So I've created an Instagram and a Twitter account where you can just DM me and, make your suggestions, start up a conversation where we can connect with one another and, try to have these interesting discussions. Now that I've had a chance to, ramble on and tell you all about what I want to achieve with the podcast, I just feel like I want to give you a little insight in how I'm going to try to approach this. Recording wise, how I'm going to, write my scripts, do the audio and all of that. I just feel like what I want to achieve is impart some level of humor. I want it to be somewhat funny. I feel like oftentimes it's hard to digest important topics because they're overcomplicated. And I don't want to overcomplicate what I'm doing. I want it to be easily digestible in the sense of anybody can approach the topics I'm discussing in a way that makes them comfortable and that you don't feel like you're being overwhelmed with an excess of information. And I've always been very inspired by the method utilized by, comedians that host satirical political shows. Think Hassan Minaj, think Trevor Noah, think John Oliver, those types of guys. They have these TV shows, and they usually utilize techniques where they have other people on, they have other hosts, and it's always very much humorous. And then they take, those political aspects and they utilize that humor to break down the barriers surrounding what's being told. And if you break down those barriers, it just makes it so much easier for a person that might not be familiar with the subject, might not have had the entire experience of being exposed to these types of things. It just makes it so much easier for them to approach these issues. You're demystifying something that's seen as very complex. And I want to try to achieve that. Now, I'm not saying I'm by any means a comedic genius. I think I'm pretty funny in normal life, but then translating that to a script, creating jokes, getting the timing right, that's always such a complex thing. And I want to try to approach that. And I've tried to put in one or two jokes in here, but I know they're not the funniest things because I wanted this intro to be very much, a thing that I don't have to do all this planning for because I want it to be very realistic to who I am as a person. Now, obviously, I do have some bullet points usually, and I try to approach those in a way that makes it natural and moves the conversation along. But I'm definitely writing scripts for my future episodes where I want it to be more structured. I want there to be I want to keep a thread throughout the story so it's very easy for somebody to go through the episode and be like, oh, okay, we're starting off at point A, we're moving to point B, point C, and then we reach our goal at the end. And that's what I want to achieve. And by putting in a joke or two, I feel like that might be a way to make it, more bearable to talk about subjects that are quite complex to approach, like what I had mentioned, topics such as, sexuality, gender identity, racism, politics. Those are very, loaded, heavy topics, and they're very important topics, but there needs to be some way for us to approach these topics without having to, be an expert in the field. I'm obviously not an expert on these areas, as I've said multiple times. I'm just your random everyday guy that's just a little more interested in researching these topics and compiling information on them. So I want to make it very easily digestible. Think of, this little, videos that, Vox or Vice Media posts. They're very short form topics such as, little 3 or 4 minute videos that try to break down a very complex topic. And I want to, be inspired by those ideas of getting bite-sized pieces of information surrounding an entire topic and then creating something that compiles all of those. And I genuinely hope there is some level of longevity with this. I'm genuinely interested in continuing this podcast along. This is very much a passion project in the sense that I'm doing this because I find these things interesting. I have no aspirations on this becoming something else except for that. It's more of just, a little personal project I want to do in my own time so I can just research things I find to be fun and interesting. And, if it just might, inspire me to do more research on a topic and not just, watch a video or two and read an article or two, but really delve into these things. It's one of those ways where you're I'm encouraging myself to expand my horizon and improve my own knowledge on different topics that I never thought about before. It's not just, that conversational level where you have that basic understanding. It's a way that inspires you to gather a lot of information for yourself and just improves your overall perspective on a lot of things that you can utilize in your day-to-day life. And it just makes it so much more interesting to have conversations with people. You don't want to be that guy that one-ups everybody. That's not the goal. You just want to have, that key information that you can always bring to a conversation that can make it more interesting when you have more insight into things. And I feel like that's the overall goal for myself. This is pretty much just a project for me to, do things that are going to improve my own life. And if I in some way can, bring some of this info I learned to other people, yippee-ki-yay, I've made one more person knowledgeable about a topic. And that's, that's the ultimate goal. Just improving the overall knowledge everybody can possess on different topics. And I feel like with the awareness we have as a generation, I feel like obviously Gen Z has become hyper aware of what's going on in the world because we're so interconnected. And I feel like that's one of those things that I want to take advantage of. That interconnectedness is such an interesting concept, and I want to utilize that, signal boost information, and also just like improve the distribution of this information. If more people know about things, it just makes it so much easier for us to improve ourselves. If everybody's aware of what's going on in the world, it just makes it so much easier for us to improve ourselves. I believe in that idiom that knowledge is the only thing that cannot be stolen from you. And that's so important because knowledge is always such an interesting thing for us because it just improves our own life. And I hope you enjoy the future episodes. I genuinely do. I'm doing this for it to be entertaining. I'm doing this as a little project for me to have some, some focus in what I do. It just inspires me. I feel like this project inspires me to be more curious about things that I don't know about. And I genuinely hope some other people, I can awaken that curiosity in them. And that's the ultimate goal. Getting those discussions going, getting that curiosity flowing. And I hope I can in some way achieve that. And I'd be grateful if you continue listening to these episodes, if you continue to give feedback and suggestions. I would love it if people go in there and just send me a message, comment, tell me what you think can be improved, what you think can be utilized, other things that can be discussed. And I would love to have that communication going on between myself and you. That'd be absolutely amazing. And I thank you very much for listening to this rambling for the past, I don't know how long it's been, but genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you tune in to the next episode. I wish you all an amazing day. Peace out.